the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Guinea. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is a continuation of Series 20 on the 2023 African Cup, played in 2024. We have done a full and short version on the groups, and are now looking at the players of each team. This episode covering Guinea's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is looking at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. And part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. We think that'll be in early January. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we compiled today and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a few other things that I'll talk about at the end of this mediacast. We did do a mediacast on the players of Guinea for the 2021 African Cup, which took place in January 2022. You can check the link in the show notes for that. That provided biographies on the candidates in quite a bit of detail. Since a lot of that is still relevant, we've decided not to commit ourselves to full player mediacasts every 2 years for the African region. So we'll be treating this one as more of an update. In that series, we were able to show who made it and who didn't make the final squad, but we could only go as far as predicting who the starters were going to be. So here we'll begin with the list we compiled for the previous cup. We'll review who made the squad and update by saying who the starters were. Then we will turn our attention to 2023. And update the players based on their participation over the past 2 years. That will emerge with a new list of players and their likelihood of making the squad. We're also going to put a few players in the spotlight. So these will be players who were not covered in the previous mediacast and who have a good chance of starting. So any main players that we don't put in the spotlight were covered in the mediacast for 2021. And actually, that'll be most of the players, and the information in the previous mediacast is not too outdated. So again, we refer you to the link in the show notes. And for fun, we're going to finish here with our early predictions of starters, and we'll let you know what to expect in part two. We have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see that the link to that on the screen right now, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, we've just completed our series on the groups, teams, and players, or at least part one of the players, for the Asian Cup, the 2023 Asian Cup, and we're now focused on the 2023 African Cup. We've done the groups and teams for that one too, and now we're working on part one of the players, which is what this podcast or mediacast is. So both of those tournaments take place in January 2024, and we've also started coverage of World Cup 2026 qualifying. All right, let us begin then, and with our look at the candidates and their likelihood of making it. And we're going to start by looking at what we had on our list in 2021, and then basically updated. I should say 2022, but it is the 2021 African Cup. So the manager back in the previous cup was Kaba Diawara. And Kaba Diawara took them through the previous tournament and remains as their manager here. Kaba Diawara, we don't see any problems that might cause them to make a sudden change at the end here. So we're going to consider him kind of like a starter or a definite candidate here. Okay, let's move on to goalkeepers. And again, we'll begin with the list of players that we had back in 2022, I'll just say in the previous cup. And we had Ali Keita as a definite candidate. Excuse me, I'm just kind of moving my monitor here. And we also had Musa Camara as a definite candidate. We had a likely candidate in Mohamed Camara. And we had no possible candidates. A possible but unlikely candidate in Ibrahim Kone, but actually we're not going to put players on the list if they haven't featured since. But he has. Ibrahim Kone comes into the narrative for this cup, and that is all the candidates we have, because the ones we had seemingly off the squad did not return. Okay, let's see what became of these players. So Ali Keita was selected for the cup and was the starter in the cup there. And since then, he's only started 5 of their 20 games over the past 2 years. He was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 7, but not selected for 7, and that includes the last 3 matches. So kind of drifting off the team is the Swedish-born Ali Keita, and his age may have something to do with that. He's now 37 years old, so they probably kind of have an eye towards their next starting keeper. So we move Ali Keita from definite down to a possible candidate. The other definite candidate in the previous cup was Musa Camara, and he was selected for the final squad, but did not see any action in the cup. In fact, he was not even called up to the bench for games 2 and 3. Since then, he has started 1 of their 20 games and been on the bench for 11 and not selected for 8 others. So we have Musa Camara also as a possible candidate now. Our likely candidate had been Mohamed Camara, and a bit of an odd story here. Initially, he seemed to be selected. I was keeping an eye on the rosters as they came out. So he was on the roster for December 23rd, not that the date matters. But a few days later, by December 26th, he had been replaced by another player that we'll talk about, actually, Ibrahim Kone. So he was not selected ultimately for the squad, Mohamed Camara, and his last appearance for the squad was way back in November 2021. So we remove him from the list here. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate, Ibrahim Kone, who we just mentioned, as initially not being selected on that December 23rd publication of the squad, but by December 26th, he was on the squad, seemingly replacing Mohamed Camara. Anyway, he was selected. He was on the roster, but on the bench for all 4 games there. However, since then, he has started 13 of their 20 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 5. So just 1 match that Ibrahim Kone was not selected for. So it looks like he has taken over the starting position from Ali Keita, and we're going to put him as the starter. Let's see if we have any other candidates to add to the list. We do. We have 2 possible candidates, newcomers, to add to the list. So the first one is Lassana Diakabi. Lassana Diakabi first appeared on the bench in September 2022 and didn't start any games, but was on the bench for 5, but then not selected for 5, including the last 2 matches. So just a possible candidate there, since they are going to need a backup. And finally, we have 1 more newcomer in Mori Keita. He's just 18 years old. He first appeared on the bench very recently in November 2023. Didn't start either of those 2 games, but was on the bench for both. So again, probably looking for a backup to bring to the cup. So I need to do a little fix up on the graphic here and move Ibrahim Kone to definite. And I had Musa Camara as definite, but in fact, we have him as likely. And let's review what we've got and then talk about the positions. So we have definite candidate Ibrahim Kone, likely candidate Musa Camara, possible candidate now Ali Keita, and also newcomers Lassana Diakabi and Mori Keita. So 5 candidates there. Let's summarize what's happened. So it was Ali Keita as the starting keeper in the cup, but Kone replaced him as the starting keeper after that, starting all games but one, with Musa Kamara getting a start in October 2023. So we think Ibrahim Kone is going to be the starter there. Probably Musa Kamara brought along, and then one of the 3 possible candidates selected, because they'll probably bring 3 keepers. Okay, let's move on to the central defense and look at what we had back in 2020 in the previous cup. And we had 3 likely candidates there. First one was Abdoulaye Cissé. The second one was Ibrahima Conte, but he's often called Ibrahima Sori Conte III, because they have several Ibrahima Contes, Ghanaian players. And finally, we have Mohamed Ali Kamara as a likely candidate. So 3 likely there, and 4 possible with Simon Fallet, Ousmane Conte, Florentine Pogba, and Seydou Sow. We also had 3 possible but unlikely candidates. None of them have come back into the fray, so we won't put them on the list. And we had one who seemed to be off the squad who does feature in the current narrative, and that's Julien Janvier. So we'll take a look at how these characters fared, beginning with the likely candidate Abdoulaye Cissé. Abdoulaye Cissé was not selected for the cup, despite him being a likely candidate. That was a bit of a surprise, and last appeared on the bench in November 2021, so shortly before the cup there. So Abdoulaye Cissé, we're going to remove from the list. It's been 2 years since he appeared for the squad. Ibrahima Sori Conte III was selected for the squad, and he started and finished all games there, except, well, he didn't finish game 4 because he was kicked out with a red card in injury time of that game. So since then, he has started 7 of their 20 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 5, and not selected for 7 others. So increasingly off the team, it seems, Ibrahima Conte. Almost fielded in all games right at the beginning, and then becoming a sub and on the bench and not selected. So drifting off the team, Ibrahima Conte, we are putting him now as a possible candidate for this tournament. Next, we have Mohamed Ali Kamara. He was a likely candidate back then, and he was selected and started and finished all 4 games there. He has since started 10 of their 20 games, subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 4. That includes the last 2 matches. He was actually out with 3 separate injuries, but only for 3 matches. So just 2 games that Mohamed Ali Kamara was not selected for. However, he too has been starting a little bit less as time goes. But that doesn't matter in terms of what we're talking about here, because we're talking about their likelihood to be selected for the cup, and we move him actually from likely up to definite for this tournament. Among our possible candidates, we begin with Simon Fallet, and he was not selected for the cup and has not appeared for the national team since October of 2021, and making his chances that much slimmer for selection for this cup. He has been unattached to a club since July 2023. So he was with Hatayspor in Turkey until 2023, and has not found the club since. So Simon Fallet off the squad. Ousmane Conte had been our second possible candidate, and he was selected for the squad. He was on the bench but did sub into 1 game game 1 and also started and finished game 3 there. He has since started only 2 of their games over the past 2 years, 2 of their 20 games, was on the bench for 4, injured for a bit and not selected for 8 matches. So he has kind of drifted off the squad, and we have him as a possible but likely candidate now. So we'll move him there. Third possible candidate, Florentine Pogba, of course, the brother of the more famous Paul Pogba. Florentine, and I'm sure he likes that mentioned every time his name gets mentioned. Florentine Pogba was not selected for the squad either. Actually, he was selected for the squad, but he was injured before the tournament and was replaced. However, he has not been called up since, and his last cap ended up being in October 2021, so a couple of months before the tournament. Not only that, but he has been in decline in terms of club affiliation. He went from Sochaux in France down to a team in India, Mohan Bagan, and actually he's been unattached since August 2023, so not attached to a club currently. Always a death knell for a player's chances of making the national team. So we're going to remove him from the list. Several reasons to think that he won't be selected. Our fourth and final possible candidate was Seydou Sow, and his fortunes have gone in the opposite direction. He was selected for the squad and started all 4 games except game 3, where he didn't appear. And Seydou Sow has since started 13 of their 20 games, and only 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So Seydou Sow has become a definite candidate for this tournament. And I think we have one more to talk about, and that's Julien Janvier. No, we have one more to talk about beyond him. But Julien Janvier was a player who seemed to be off the squad, and he was not selected for the Cup. But he did return since, after a more than 2.5-year absence. He returned in June 2022 and started 2 games. In fact, the last 2 games in November here, he started, and he was, well, that's the salient point. Basically came out of the cold to start the last 2 games. However, he was recently listed as injured, so we have an injury asterisk over him. But his return causes him to be moved up to the possible level here. And we do actually have a couple of other players to add. First is Mukhtar Diakabi. Mukhtar Diakabi, and we have him as a definite candidate with an injury risk, though. So he got his first cap in June 2022, Diakabi, and he started the first 9 of the remaining 13 games there, but then was injured for 2 and not selected for the last 2 matches. So it was a lower leg fracture. But as I mentioned, he wasn't listed as injured for the last 2 matches, just not selected. So he may be recovering and may be available for the Cup. We'll have to see. In fact, we're going to put him in the spotlight because but for that injury, he would be a likely starter. Mukhtar Diakabi has been then with the team since 2022 with 9 caps. He's 27 years old, so a bit late in joining the national team. However, he plays for Valencia in Spain since 2018 and was with Lyon in France before that. In fact, part of Lyon's youth club, and he was born in France too. So he played 26 games for the under 19 to 21 France national team. So, you know, a fairly good resume for this player, Mukhtar Diakabi, and a definite candidate here, except for the injury risk, which we'll update in part 2. We also have a couple of possible candidates to add. The first one is Abdurrahman Bari. He was new in October 2023, but started, well, didn't start any of the remaining 4 games, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. So making inroads there. And finally, we have Nabi Uler, new in November. So got his first appearance on the bench in November, but did start one of the remaining 2 games and was on the bench for the other. So we won't spotlight either of those candidates because they don't look like starters, but they are possible for making the final squad. So let's summarize what we got, the new list, and then talk about the situation over the past couple of years. We have 3 definite candidates in Mohamed Ali Kamara, Seydou Sow, and newcomer Mukhtar Diakabi. We have no likely candidates, but 4 possible candidates in Ibrahim Asori Conte, the 3rd, or number 3, really. Next, Julien Janvier, and then newcomers Abdurrahman Bari and Nabi Uler. And we also have a possible but unlikely candidate in Ousmane Conte. So let's talk about what happened in the Cup. And we see maybe why they have so many candidates, because they often go with a 3-man back line there. And it was Kamara, Conte, and Sow, and Seydou Sow making up the 3-man back line in all 4 games, except that Ousmane Conte replaced Sow in game 3 there. So pretty consistent group of 3 there. They did switch to a 2-man central defense since sometimes, with Diakabi consistently played, and Sow and Kamara rotating their pairing with him. But as we saw, Diakabi was injured for the last 4, and Sow played all of those, flanked by right back Ibrahima Diakate. Kind of funny that with all of these candidates, they turned to a right back to come in. It was Ibrahim Diakate for the first 2, and then Janvier for the last 2. So as we said, it looks like Diakabe seems to have recovered, although lower leg fracture seems serious. It might have been just a minor fracture. However, we see Janvier is under an injury cloud. So we would predict Mukhtar Diakabi as one of the starters here. Seydou Sow has started recently, but that's more like maybe replacing Diakabi. We have to really wait until we see how these injuries turn out to make a confident prediction, because it could be a rotation of many of these players. Okay, that's a long time on central defense with a lot of candidates, and I have put it in the wrong spot, so I'm just going to take a second to fix up my graphics here. And let's move on to left backs and look at the situation back in the previous Cup. So we didn't have any definite candidates for left back, but we had a likely candidate in Isiaga Silla, and a possible candidate in Pa Konate. We had a couple of candidates at lower levels of likelihood than that, but none of them have come to back into the squad. So we'll just leave it at that and see how these players fared since we predicted their fate in 2021. And Isiaga Silla was selected for the games. He started games 1, 2, and 3 there, but he wasn't even on the bench for game 4. He has since started 15 of their 20 games over the past 2 years, injured for the last 2 of those, though, 3 matches that he wasn't selected for. So we had him as a definite candidate. However, his injury for the last 2 is a bit of a concern. So we'll have to get closer to the Cup to see if that looks like it might keep him out of the Cup. Meanwhile, we have Pa Konate, or we had him as a possible candidate. He was selected for the squad, but he was just a substitute, came briefly into game 3 at the end, and then went on to start game 4 there. And he has since started one of their 20 games, subbed in for one and on the bench for 3. Not selected for 12, including the last 7 matches. So Pa Konate now looking like a possible but unlikely candidate. And a new player is coming in who may take his spot. And we have him at the possible level. It's Sekou Silla. So we have 2 left backs with the last name of Silla. Sekou Silla got his first cap in March 2022, so a few months after the last cup, and he started 3 of their remaining 14 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. So 5 games that he wasn't selected for, and the 3 that he started were in fact the last 3. So possibly replacing Isiaga Silla, who was injured for the last 2. Nevertheless, it does seem he is making inroads into the team, and he's a possible candidate here. So let's summarize. We have Isiaga Silla as a definite candidate, Sekou Silla as a possible candidate, and Pa Konate possible but unlikely there. So in the past 2 years, this is how it's gone. It was Isiaga Silla for the first 3 games of the cup, and Pa Konate came in for the 4th. It was actually a left back position in the first 2 matches where they had a 5-man back line, so 3 central defenders and a right back and a left back. But for the 3rd and 4th matches of the previous African Cup, it was a 3-man back line with the right back and left back pushing forward into a midfield position, so left wing and right wing. It has been almost exclusively Isiaga Silla since that time, but as we saw, he was injured for the last 2 and replaced not by Pa Konate, who seems to be off the squad, but by newcomer Sekou Silla. So again, we'll have to look at the injury situation when we get closer to the cup. But if we're picking a starter at this point, we would pick Isiaga Silla as a starter there. Let's move on to right backs and see what we had back in 2022 or in the African Cup there last time. We have a dearth of candidates here, actually. No definite, likely, or possible candidates. We did have 3 candidates below that level of likelihood, and none of them have come back into contention. However, when the preliminary and final squad were published, we got a couple of new candidates. No surprise, given how they didn't have any candidates here, and that turned out to be Antoine Conte and Gaoussou Youssef Sibi. Gaoussou Youssef Sibi, both new candidates there coming in at the end. Let's see how this turned out. Antoine Conte was not selected for the squad because he was injured. So he was selected for the final squad, but he was injured and replaced by Fode Camara, who I think we're going to run into soon, but he's not coded as a right back. Gaoussou Youssef Sibi was selected for the cup, but he saw no action there. So on the bench for all 4 games, and really hasn't appeared for the team since that cup. In fact, he's now coded as a central midfielder, even though he was then coded as just a generic defender. So Gaoussou Youssef Sibi off the squad, we will say. Antoine Conte, we move up to a definite candidate here because despite being injured for the cup, he played his first cap in March 2022 and started 11 of their remaining 14 games and was on the bench for 2 and not selected for just 1. So we're going to put Antoine Conte in the spotlight because he looks like he'll be the starter. He has 10 caps then for Guinea. Sorry, that should be 11 caps. And he plays for a team in Bulgaria, Botev Plovdiv. in Bulgaria. He's actually a bit of a traveler because he's been with teams in Israel and Romania and France, where he was born. So Stade Reims in France from 2014 to 17, and actually Paris Saint-Germain in France from 2013 to 14. I don't think he played any games for Paris Saint-Germain, but he was with their youth club from 2007 to 13. So a pretty good resume there, and now seems to enjoy going from country to country. So Antoine Conte, a definite candidate, and we have a couple more to add as they have brought in some right backs, which they were lacking in the previous tournament. And the first one is at the likely level, Silla Dembo. And we also have one at the possible level, Ibrahim Diakate. So Dembo Silla got his first cap the same time that Antoine Conte did in March 2022. And he started 3 of their games and was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2. Actually, that doesn't seem to add up. But anyway, he has been called up consistently. He's just 21 years old, whereas Antoine Conte is 29 years old, I forgot to mention. And Silla Dembo, we are going to spotlight too, because he's a likely candidate. And he plays for Lorient in France. And like Conte, was born in France and grew up through that system, mostly through Stade Laval, who he was with their youth club for 11 years and then their senior team for 2 years before moving on to Lorient, where he is now. Ibrahim Diakate, our possible candidate, got his first cap in September 2022 and started 2 of their remaining 11 games. However, he was not selected for the last 2 matches, and given that they have 2 kind of good candidates over here, we think his chances are quite small. So a lot of changes in the right back position, and we end up with Antoine Conte as a definite candidate, Dembo Silla as a likely candidate, and Ibrahim Diakate as a possible candidate. So we'll finish just by summarizing the position. You may be wondering, who did they use as right back in the tournament? Because they didn't have any. And indeed, it was central midfielder Mamadou Kane in game 1 of the Cup. And then defensive midfielder Ibrahim Cisse took over for the next 3 games. And as we saw on the left side, that was a right back position in game 2, moving up to a right wing position for games 3 and 4. Antoine Conte arrived in March and has played most of the games since, replaced twice by Dembo Silla, and in the last game by the central defender Euler. There. So that is the right backs, and we are ready to move on to the left back position, the defensive midfielders, or the midfield in general. And we begin with defensive midfielders. So let's look at what we had back in the previous Cup. We had no definite candidate, but likely candidate Amadou Diawara and Ibrahim Cisse, who we've just met, playing as right back in the previous Cup. We have a possible candidate in Ibrahima Kamara. And we had 3 players below that level of possibility, none of them either making the Cup or being called up since. So we'll deal with these candidates, and we begin with Amadou Diawara. So he was selected for the Cup. He played all 4 games except for game 3, where he wasn't even called up to the bench. So some problem there. But he has since started 18 of their 20 games, Amadou Diawara. And he was subbed in for 1 of those and not selected for 1. So, wow, that's an impressive record. And we have him now as a definite candidate for this Cup. Next one, Ibrahima Cisse, as we saw, gained a starting position after game 2 for 3 games in the Cup, playing as a right back in game 2 and a right winger in games 3 and 4. He has since only started 6 of their 20 games subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, but not selected for 7 matches, including the last 5. So he has been used decreasingly over the period and then not selected for the last 5. His club affiliations have actually deteriorated a little bit too. He was with Fulham in England from 2017 to 20 and then went down to Serang in Belgium and now is with Ural Yekaterinburg in Russia. That's not even a Russian team I'm familiar with. So a bit of, or a fairly steep decline, I would say there. So we have now Ibrahima Cissé as a possible but unlikely candidate. Kamara Fode came up, Fode Kamara came up in our previous conversation, and I see how he's entering into the squad because I forgot to mention a couple of new candidates that were added to the squad. So we'll just add them to the list here as new candidates, Mori Konate and Fode Kamara. But I will come back to him because we'll go in order here. Next on the list was possible candidate Ibrahima Kamara, and he was not selected for the squad and has not appeared actually for the national team since June 2021. However, one detail in his favor is a bit of a move up in his club affiliations. Only a slight one though. He went from Moreirense in Portugal to Boa Vista, a slightly bigger club in Portugal in 2022. However, that didn't seem to earn him any caps recently. So we have to have Ibrahima Kamara moving from a possible candidate last time to off the squad this time. I'm going to leave him on the list as seems to be off the squad, just in case there. Okay, so we now turn our attention to those new candidates, beginning with Mori Konate. So he was selected for the squad. He hadn't appeared for the national team before being named to the preliminary squad there, but was selected. He appeared only in 1 game, though, as a substitute in game 2, where he came in at the 78th minute and got his first official cap there, and has since started 1 of their remaining 20 games. Subbed in for 8, though, and on the bench for 8. And the only 3 matches he missed were due to injury. So he's been consistently called up. So we move him to the likely level, though it doesn't seem to be a starter. We think he's likely to be called up. Fode Kamara, I've mentioned him a couple of times now, and he was newly added to the squad, also never appearing for the national team before being named to the preliminary squad, but he was selected even though he didn't see any action in the cup there. And unlike Mori Konate, though, he has not been called up since. He has jumped a bit in his club affiliations, moving from Horoya in Guinea to Sfaxien in Tunisia, one of the bigger teams in Tunisia there in 2023. So it doesn't seem like that has helped him out in recent games, but perhaps it will. Fode Kamara is only 21 years old. So we will move him from a new candidate last time to seemingly, well, I'm going to put him as possible, but unlikely. You know, once again, he could be called up unexpectedly. Okay, so we've covered all the players that were on the list back in 2022 African Cup, and we have 1 more to add who's new, Abdoulaye Touré at the possible level. Abdoulaye Touré got his first cap recently in October 2023, and he started all 4 of their remaining games. So that is quite an entrance onto the scene here, Abdoulaye Touré. We tend not to put new candidates like that at the likely level because sometimes they're a flash in the pan, but really starting the last 4 makes him almost likely. he plays for Le Havre in France and was with Genoa in Italy before that. He's French-born. I'm giving a bit of a spotlight here because he might be starting. He was very late to join the team. He's 29 years old now, so he got his first cap in 2023 there. But Abdoulaye Touré making a late bid for the squad here. So we'll summarize what we have here, but we won't kind of do the narrative on the position until we finish with central midfielders. But for defensive midfielders, we have definite candidate Amadou Diawara, likely candidate Mori Kamate, possible but almost likely candidate Abdoulaye Touré, and then two possible but unlikely in Ibrahima Cissé and Fode Camara, and Ibrahima Camara seems to be off the team. Okay, but we'll look at the candidates for central midfield before we talk about the midfield summary. So back in 2020, back in the previous Cup, we had two definite candidates, Naby Keita and Mamadou Kane, who we saw as a right back in game one of the last Cup. We have a likely candidate in Mady Camara, and we had a possible candidate in Kamso Mara. We also had a couple of new, I think, a new candidate, or he might have been an injured candidate. Actually, I can probably figure it out here. He was a new candidate, Iliax Moriba. He doesn't seem new to me anymore because he's been a big part of the team, as we'll see since. But those are our candidates, so let's see how things worked out for them. Naby Keita, captain of the team, at least for the captain of the team in the last Cup. And so, of course, he was selected and he started and finished the first 3 games, but he was suspended on yellow cards for the last game there. He has since started 10 of their 20 games, but he's been struggling with various injuries and missed 8 of the games because of that. Just one match that he wasn't selected for, but a bit of a cloud of injury hanging over for him. He made a significant club move from Liverpool in England, where he was from 2018 to 2023, recently going to Werder Bremen in Germany since 2023. So Naby Keita, we have as a definite, he remains a definite candidate, but with a bit of an injury cloud hanging over him. Our other definite candidate was Mamadou Kane, and he was selected for the squad. He started and finished games 1 and 3, but was on the bench for games 2 and 4. However, he continued with the squad until June 2022, but hasn't played for them since then. He's just 26 years old, and he did maybe take a bit of a decline in his club affiliation from Olympiacos in Greece to Paphos in Cyprus. Anyway, for whatever reason, he has not appeared since June 2022, and so we move him down to a possible but unlikely level, all the way from a definite candidate for the last Cup to an unlikely one for this Cup. We had Mady Camara as a likely candidate last time, and he was not selected for the squad. That was a bit of a surprise to us, given his involvement to that point. And ultimately, he hasn't played for the national team since October 2021. He, on the other hand, has good club affiliations. He's with Olympiacos in Greece, just like Mamadou Kane was. But recently, he was loaned to Roma in Italy for 2022-23. So certainly has the credentials to be on the national squad. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Perhaps he was insulted that he wasn't selected for the last African Cup, given that he was a fairly strong candidate. So Mady Camara moving from likely down to also possible but unlikely there, having not appeared for quite a while. We had a possible candidate in Kamso Mara, and He was not selected for the squad and has not appeared for the national team since November 2021. So we will move him off the squad. And we have a couple of players to add. Actually, just one in Seydou Cissé at the likely level. So Seydou Cissé got his first cap in June 2022 and started 5 of the remaining 13 games and subbed in for 7. So he was on the bench for only, he was not. Oh no, he was on the bench for 1. So he was selected for all matches since his first call-up. And we don't necessarily think he's going to be a starter, so we won't put the spotlight on him. But we do think he's a likely candidate, having been called up so regularly. And yes, we do have one more, Amadou Keita, at the possible level. And he got his first appearance just recently on the bench in November 2023. Didn't start either of the games, but was on the bench for both of them. So Amadou Keita playing for Eupen in Belgium as a possible candidate. So let's summarize central midfielders then. We have a definite candidate in Naby Keita, likely candidate Seydou Cissé, and possible candidate Amadou Keita. But Mamadou Kane and Mady Camara are both possible but unlikely candidates. Oh, and I'm sorry, we didn't talk about the newcomer Iliax Moriba, who's probably the biggest story here. So I'll cover him. He moves up to a definite candidate. I'll actually put him in the spotlight because he came in so late to the cup last time that I don't think we did the bio on him. So Iliax Moriba got his first cap then in 2022, and he now has 14 caps and 1 goal. He's just 20 years old. And he plays for Leipzig in Germany and was loaned to Valencia in Spain. Prior to that, he played for Barcelona in Spain in 2021 and Barcelona's B squad and youth squad before that. So a sparkling resume there. As far as the African Cup went, he didn't appear in game 1 in the last African Cup. It gained a starting position for the remaining 3 games and basically has been a starter since. He started 14 of their 20 games over the past 2 years and subbed in for 5 and was on the bench for 1 other. So always called up, almost always fielded, and quite often a starter. Iliax Moriba has become an important player for Guinea, so we add him to the list here. So we have a lot of candidates here at the defensive midfielder and central midfielder section. Let me summarize the position. So it was a 3-man central midfield, which perhaps justifies the number of candidates. 3-man central midfield in the first 3 games of the Cup. But just 1 in game 4. That was a 3-1-4-2 formation, although we'll see that some of these players do move up to a more attacking position. Anyway, Amadou Diawara, the defensive midfielder, was the centre man in games 1, 2, and 4, and Kane in game 3. Central midfielders Keita, Moriba, and left midfielder, who we're going to meet soon, Aguibou Camara, rotating around him. So a great irony here is that despite all of the candidates we have on the table, it's an out of position player coming in, or kind of out of position, as we'll see. Anyway, those 3, Keita, Moriba, and Camara, rotated in the positions after the Cup, sometimes as a 2-man midfield and sometimes a 3-man midfield, or actually I should say 4, because Diawara was in there too. Naby Keita was injured towards the end, and newcomer Abdoulaye Touré became effectively his replacement, starting the last 4 games. So maybe that's wise of us to keep Touré at the possible level, because he really is just coming in to replace Naby Keita there. Okay, so we've kind of juggled three positions there. And we're going to move on to the left and right midfield. And just a comment here, really, with just one candidate among both positions. The position really does exist because they often have a line of three midfielders, as we have seen. They use that about half of the time. And but we saw that for the most part, it's covered by defensive midfielders or central midfielders. However, one of the main candidates there was Agui Kamara, who is actually coded as a left midfielder. Ironically, though, he was playing on the right during this period. So it was actually Naby Keita mostly on the left. Otherwise, the positions were covered by central and defensive midfielders. So we'll just introduce our candidate here, our lone candidate, but at the likely level, Agui Kamara. And sorry, what did we have back in 2022? That's where I should begin. Well, he was there also as a likely candidate for the previous cup and remains so here. Agui Kamara was selected and he started games 1 and 4. However, he wasn't even on the bench for games 2 and 3. And I should maybe explain that. I think they brought 28 players. Because of COVID, they were allowed to bring more players. But even among those 28, I think they just called 23 of them up to the bench. So there was 5 players for every game that were on the roster but actually not called up to the bench. So that seems to have been the case for Agui Kamara in games 2 and 3. Since then, he started 11 of their 20 games and was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 2 and not selected for 4 matches there. So a likely candidate, Agui Kamara, probably playing as a right midfielder. There. We don't have any candidates actually coded as right midfielders. So we move on to left wingers. And this would be left wingers, left attacking midfielders, and possibly even left forwards. So the upper left quadrant of the field. And back in the previous cup, we had a likely candidate. We had only a possible candidate in Ahmad Mendes Moreira. And we did have a couple of candidates who seemed to be off the squad. We're not going to put them on because they haven't reappeared. But we did have a new candidate when the rosters came out in Mamadou Diallo. So just 2 candidates to kind of review here, and actually both of them off the squad. So Ahmad Mendes Mora was not selected for the squad and hasn't appeared since October 2021. Mamadou Diallo, on the other hand, was selected for the squad. He was subbed into games 1 and 3 there. He also had not been named to the squad or not appeared for Guinea before being named to the preliminary squad, and hasn't appeared since the African Cup, actually. So both of those players removed from the list here. And we do have a couple of other players, though, to add. The first one is at the possible level. It's Yadali Diaby. And he got his first cap in March 2023. He started just 1 game, but was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2. However, he was not called up for the last 2 matches in November. And yeah, we won't mention the other candidate because he's at the possible but unlikely level. So not many candidates here, neither back in the previous cup nor now. So let's see who has been covering the position as we summarize it. Actually, the position was not used in the first 3 games of the cup. If you envision a 5-3-2 formation, there's really no left winger or left midfield or left attacking midfielder in that. In the 3-5-2 of game 3, the left back and right back were pushed up to become wingers, as we saw. So again, these players not really needed. So it was actually left defender Paco Nate playing the role in game 4 there. Left midfielder Agui Kamara had the role after the cup there, usually as a left attacking midfielder. And then the forward, Francois Camano, took over when it was a left forward role, as in a 4-3-3 formation. Towards the end, Diaby and forward Bio each started once in the position, but it went back to Kamano and Kamara for the last 2 games. So right now, it looks like they have no one kind of coded. It's out of position players playing there, and forward Kamano and left midfielder Kamara kind of covering the role. But I wonder if they will redress that problem when they get to the cup and actually find someone coded as a left winger or a left attacking midfielder. Okay, let's move over to the right side and look at what we had back in the cup. And a similar problem, even worse, in fact, over here, where we only had 2 candidates who seemed to be off the squad and no other candidates in this role. So there are no candidates to go through. However, since a couple of candidates have been brought in, at least tried out. So these are both at the portable level. It's Bafode Dansoko and Thierno Barry, both of those at the portable level. So Bafode Dansoko got his first cap in March 2023 and didn't start any games, but was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2. And not selected for 8 others, including the last 3 matches. And I'm just realizing I should have said March 2022 there. So they brought him in shortly after the cut, maybe to redress their lack of right wingers. But it looks like he didn't work out really and is just a possible candidate. The other one, also brought in March 22 was Thierno Barry, and he started 3 of their games, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2, but not selected for 5 others, including the last 2 matches. So both of these guys are possible candidates, but don't really look like they've seized the position. Let's see the situation, though, to see who was actually playing it in the cup and beyond. And once again, the position was not used in the first 2 games, and then it was the right winger, the player playing right back, pushing up for games 3 and 4. And we saw actually even that right back was an out of position play. I believe it was Cisse. Anyway, on the right wing, it was various players tried out after, but ultimately the forward, who we'll meet soon, Guia predominated in the position. And Thierno Barry here was the only other player tried out to get more than 1 start. So tentatively, we have the out of position Guia looking like he's going to be the starter going into this cup, unless they actually find someone at the very end who is coded as a right winger. Okay, that is the end of midfielders, and we move on to the forward line, where we start with attacking midfielders. And I think I said Francois Kamano was a forward. Now I see here he's coded as an attacking midfielder, but he is among the players we'll talk about here. We're going to go back to the previous cup to see who was on the list, and we had a likely candidate in Ibrahima Conte, and another likely candidate in Morley Silla, and then 2 possible candidates, Francois Kamano and Seydou Bassouma, and Ismail Kamara was possible but unlikely, but I see that he hasn't come back into the fray, so we just won't put him on the list here. Okay, so 4 candidates to look at here. Let's see how things turned out for them. Ibrahima Conte, our first likely candidate, was selected for the squad, but was just a substitute, appearing in game 2, and has not appeared for the game since the African Cup. So Ibrahima Conte seemingly off the squad. He's a veteran, so we'll put him as seems to be off the squad. Slight chance of him coming back because he's only 32 years old. Next, we have Morley Silla. He was selected for the cup, but also a substitute. coming into games, into 3 of the games there, and he has since he has since started 1 of their remaining 20 games, subbing in for 8 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 10, including the last 5 matches. So things not looking good for Morley Silla either. We're going to put him as a possible candidate. I have him as possible here, but I'm actually thinking possible but unlikely, and I think I will put him as possible but unlikely, making a decision on the fly here. Let's look at our 2 possible candidates. The first one was Francois Camano, and he was not selected for the squad, but he had returned. He returned after a 17-month absence in March 2023, but then started 7 of their remaining 11 games, subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 1, so not selected for 2 matches there. He did suffer a bit of a decline in his club status. He had been with Bordeaux in France from 2016 to 20, and Lokomotiv Moscow in Russia from 2020 to 2023, but is now with Abha in Saudi Arabia. So a bit of a step down there in his club affiliations, and we have Francois Camano now as a possible candidate. Well, that's where he was last time, but with a bit of up and down, he ends up remaining where he was. Our second possible candidate was Seydou Souma, and he was selected for the squad, but he didn't see any action in the 4 games. In fact, 2 of those games he wasn't even on the bench for, and that was his last appearance in the for the national team in the previous African Cup. So Seydou Souma will remove from the list here, and we just have 1 player to add at the possible level, and that is Karim Cisse. And he first appeared on the bench recently in October 2023 and didn't start any of the remaining 4 games, but was subbed in for 3 of them and on the bench for 1 other. So Karim Cisse, a possible candidate. So our list has really deteriorated from the last time, where we had 2 likely and 2 possible candidates. Now we have no likely or definite. We have 2 possible candidates in Francois Camano and Karim Cisse, and a possible but unlikely in Morley Silla, and seemingly off the squad, Ibrahima Conte, who maybe has a slight chance of returning. So that is the situation in the attacking midfield. Okay, and we go now to forwards and look at the situation back in the previous cup, and we had no definite candidates, but 1 likely candidate in Jose Conte, and then a string of possible but unlikely and players seemingly off the squad. That is, to frighten you here, 5, 9, 14 candidates in all. However, we only need to talk about the possible ones, because the all 9 of the ones below that level have not appeared for the squad since. So just 5 possible candidates here. We had Mohamed Bayo, Sori Kaba, Abubakar Demba Kamara, Morgan Guilavogui, who we've talked about, and Mustafa Kouyaté, all possible candidates for the cup there. So let's see how things worked out. Beginning with our likely candidate, Jose Conte. He was called up to the squad. He started games 1, 3, and 4, but was actually injured for game 2. And since that time, he has only started 4 of their 20 games. Actually, yes, 4 of their 20 games. Subbed in for 3. Those were the 3. Started 4 of their 20 games, but 3 of them were in the African Cup. So since then, just started 1 game, subbed in for 3, not selected for 13, including the last 6 matches. So I have him as a possible candidate here. And I guess I'll leave him there. Despite that declining participation with the national team, his actual club status has improved, moving from a team in China, the Hangzhou Mighty Lions, really a team I'm not familiar with, so a smaller team in China, to one of the best teams in Asia, Urawa Red Diamonds in Japan. So as far as Asia goes, that is a big step up, and maybe we'll earned him a late call up there. He moved to the Red Diamonds in 2023. So Jose Conte will leave him as a possible candidate here, although really his record with the national team here makes him seem unlikely. Let's look at the first of our possible candidates, Mohamed Bayo. He was selected for the squad and he started 3 of the 4 games there and subbed into the other in the previous cup. And Bayo has since started 10 of their 20 games, subbed in for 3. There were 7 games that he wasn't selected for. And so we have him as a possible candidate. I think that's maybe a little bit harsh. And he's really kind of likely. We will put him ahead of Jose Conte, though, there. Next, we have Sori Kaba. Sori Kaba was selected for the Cup and was subbed into 2 of the games. However, he has not appeared since the African Cup. So we're going to take him off the list here. Or maybe we'll put him down to seems to be off the squad there. Just in case there is a slight chance he'll reappear. Same is true with Boubacar Demba Kamara. No, not the same. He was not selected for the squad, but he has not appeared since November 2021. So we really will remove him from the squad there. And we had Morgan Guiavogi. So Morgan Guiavogi's fortunes have gone in the opposite direction. He was selected for the squad. Just 1 game he actually did start, and otherwise just a substitute. But since then started 10 of their 20 games, subbed in for 3 and was not selected for 6 matches. He was out with coronavirus for 1 game. So Morgan Guiavogi, we saw, has been playing as a right winger, probably the player who's played that position the most. He has also played as a forward during the tournament, so we won't relocate him here, but we will move him up to the likely level, Morgan Guiavogi. The last of our possible candidates was Mustafa Kouyaté, and Mustafa Kouyaté was not selected for the previous cup and has not appeared for the team since November 2021. So we're going to remove him from the list here. Okay, let us take a look. There is 1 new candidate to add, and it is definite candidate, Serhou Guirassy, and we're going to put him in the spotlight immediately. Guirassy got his first cap in March of 2022, so not long after the last cup there, and he has started 10 of their remaining 14 games, subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 1. So the only match he missed was one he was injured for. So that gives him 12 caps and 3 goals since his first in 2022. He's 27 years old, so kind of joined the team a little late there. He was born in France, so perhaps trying to make the French team, as some Guinean players do. He plays for Stuttgart in Germany. That's a recent move in 2023, although he was on loan with them. From Reims in France from 2020 to 2023, and Amiens in France before that. And mostly French teams there, and was with youth clubs in France too, because he grew up there. So yeah, not a lot to talk about him because he is new to the squad and doesn't have any kind of previous tournaments or anything with the squad. He did score 1 of their 9 goals in qualifying. Serhou Guirassy is suddenly moving into a definite position for the team. So let's review what we've got for forwards. And we're going to put Guirassi as the starter there. And we have a definite candidate in him, Serhu Guirassi, a likely candidate in Morgan Guiavogui, although he's playing more as a right winger or right attacking midfielder. And then two possible candidates in Mohamed Bayo and Jose Conte. And we left Sori Kaba on the squad because an outside chance of him coming back into the squad. Okay, that brings us to the end of the look at our candidates. And so we're going to finish with a spotlight review of the players that we think are going to be the starters, our predictions. So we'll actually begin with the manager. Kaba Diawara, we don't see any problems on the team that would make or cause them to make a sudden change at this point, so we consider him a starter. Ibrahim Kone, the goalkeeper, seems to have taken over from Ali Keita as the starting goalkeeper, and we are predicting him to be the starter. Central defense, we have a few issues and a lot of candidates. So our best candidates at this point are Mukhtar Diakabi and Seydou Sow. However, Diakabi is under a bit of an injury concern, so we're just going to put those as kind of possible candidates. We're a bit unsure in that section. At left back, we have Isiaga Silla, also if he's fit, so a bit of an injury concern over him, but we think if he's fit, he'll be the starter. At right back, newcomer Antoine Conte, we think will be the starter and the right back position. In the central midfield, we have a lot of good candidates here. We think Amadou Diawara and Iliax Moriba will be starters, but they sometimes have more than two central midfielders, or some of them move up to attacking midfielder. So we're going to have Naby Keita, again, a fitness concern, and Agüibou Camara, both as kind of likely candidates here, but we're not putting our full confidence behind them. In the case of Agüibou Camara, he has played as both a midfielder and sometimes as a kind of the left wing, left attacking midfielder position. So we're going to put him there too, alongside Francois Camano. We think one of those two will be an out of position starter as the left winger or left attacking midfielder, or even left forward if it comes to that. On the right, it's the same situation where they haven't really found a candidate coded in that position. So we think right now Morgan Guilavogui will be the stand-in, as he has been recently for that position. For central attacking midfielder, well, we've seen a couple of them here, Francois Camaro, playing out of position, and they don't always use that position. So we have no one there, to make a long story short. And for a forward, we have Serhu Guirassi, a newcomer who has really inserted himself into the squad and who we think is going to be the starter. All right, that's it, the spotlight review. And we're going to finish here with part 3 and tell you what we're going to do in the part 2 of the mediacast. So we're going to go over the selections from the list that we created here and tell you which ones made it to the squad and which one didn't. We'll tell you which we're surprised about, either candidates we thought who would make it but didn't, or new candidates added to the squad that we didn't expect or didn't know about. We'll also give an update on injuries, which will be very important for Guinea because they have a couple of key players under an injury cloud right now. So when we get closer to the cup, we'll hopefully be able to clarify that. So that's the end here of part 1, and we hope to see you for part 2, which will probably come out in early January. We originally planned to tag on our past, present and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.